Mark Davies, welcome to the Potential is Human podcast. First off, big thank you for making the time to connect with me today. I know when I first reached out to you, I really was looking forward to what this conversation holds. So, how are you and where are you calling in from?
Ryan, I am so happy to be here. It's an honor to be on your podcast and to finally meet the man, the legend. I'm based in Moreleta Park in Pretoria, and it's a beautiful sunny day, isn't it? I don't know. I don't know how things are in Cape Town.
I'm in Cape Town. I was on the mountain for sunrise this morning, and it's a beautiful sunny Cape day as well.
Magic,
Yeah.
magic.
Mark, I want to dive straight in on one point that really stood out to me. When I asked you if you would like to have the chat, you said that wisdom must return to the world. What did you
Indeed.
mean by that?
When we embark on our spiritual journey, whatever that path may be, we learn about ourselves, we learn about the world we live in, the people that are in it, that sort of thing. And through experience, through interaction, feedback, connection, we learn lessons. Now, life, it's often said that um, the universe, the world is a school, or this planet is a school. Um, I prefer to think of it as a workshop, because in a workshop you get to make stuff, you get to create things, and when you learn a lesson, then it's like being given a tool. And when you use that tool or apply that tool, because there's a difference between using a tool and applying it, right? You can knock yourself on the head using it, or you can turn stuff loose by applying it. When you get a tool, or when you've acquired a tool somehow, and then you apply it, then you have wisdom. So wisdom is experience applied.
Hmm.
And wisdom is a in a way it's a gift. I've always thought of wisdom in terms of I think there's a biblical reference to it somewhere where I think it was Solomon who was referring to wisdom as a woman who must be courted. Um, not entirely sure of the reference, but I really love that image, because wisdom is indeed, to me at least, a woman who must be courted. She must be approached. She must be entreated. She must be treated with respect. And the gifts that she gives you are irreplaceable. But when you are given a tool that you can apply, then it's yours, whether you give it away or whether you don't. But when you give it away, there's an enrichment that comes with that. It's the it's almost like a silly example, but it's like an extended warranty on the tool that you bought. It's an enrichment that feeds your soul. It nourishes your soul. It nourishes your very being, and through the act of giving to others by imparting this wisdom, and bear in mind that wisdom should not be cast before swine. That the pearls of wisdom should not be cast before swine. So, bearing in mind that wisdom should not be given lightly, it should be given to somebody deserving. Now, that's a loaded term, because who are we to determine who is deserving? So, my yardstick for that is you give it to somebody that there's a little voice inside you that says this person needs it. And if you feel moved to impart wisdom, and you can see that they're going to receive it and not cast your pearls before swine, then give it freely, because the gift in return is your own personal enrichment, your spiritual growth, your spiritual evolution. And so ultimately, what's so wonderful about this, or counterintuitive, is that the imparting of wisdom is actually a selfish exercise, because by imparting wisdom and knowing that you're going to get something in return, it's it's its own sort of reward, its own reward. So it's kind of selfish from that perspective, because you know you're getting something in return. So you're giving it in order to get, you're not necessarily giving it in order to get something in return, but there's that element of you will be rewarded somewhere along the line. Somehow you're going to be enriched because of what you've given away, because of what you've learned. And because we're all on different paths, everybody's got their own wisdom to share. So there's an element of context that comes into it, because is that old story, that old urban legend about the woman who always used to, when she would make a roast on the weekend, she would cut off the end. And her daughter one day asked her, well, why do you always cut off the end of the roast before you make it? She says, well, I don't know. Your gran always used to do it. That's what I learned. That's how I did. I learned how to do it. And then the daughter asked the grandmother, why did you cut the end of the roast? And she said, well, otherwise it wouldn't fit in the pot. So, that kind of wisdom is contextualized because of the pot into which it was applied or utilized or whatever. So not everybody's wisdom is applicable to the next person. And there's an interesting frequency or magnetism that applies to it, how we attract into our world, into our circles, people with whom we can share wisdom or who can impart wisdom to us. So it's an interesting dynamic. That's a very long-winded way of answering your question, but
It's an excellent way. There's no cut way. And what stood out for me there is when you said wisdom is experience applied. And listeners, and myself included, have maybe heard before that wisdom is knowledge applied, but knowledge is very mind-based. And in your explanation, I love that it's experiential. Wisdom is
yes,
experience applied, and then that is knowing. And as you've said, then sharing that knowing brings us back to that giving is receiving itself. Not giving in order to receive, but in giving the wisdom and sharing it with those who we feel called to share it with. What you're saying is it deepens that knowing, and we actually get something back in return.
yes, yeah. I think skills. You're absolutely right. There's a difference. There is a difference between knowledge and experience. Um, because you can read all the books on how to swim, but until you've actually done it, you'll never really know what it's about. And I think skills or skill sets or talents or that kind of thing are very often an intuitive thing. It's all very often something we're born with, or something that we're drawn to, or something that we grow into. And those skill sets form the background or the context, or perhaps even the scaffolding into which we put our wisdom and then package it, as it were, to others.
Excellent. Mark, you are a life coach, a hypnotherapist, if I'm correct, a trauma incident reduction facilitator. You have certifications in NLP, you have an honors in psychology, and then you also said to me that you have an ongoing certificate in life.
Yes.
Before we dive into what all of those professional aspects of what you do actually mean, tell us a little bit about your background, whatever you feel right in sharing, your upbringing, your experiences of traveling the world, and how things have unfolded for you in order for you to get to this place where you apply all of these methodologies and tools.
Thank you. So let's see, where do I begin? Okay, so once upon a time, uh, I was born to a father. My father was a Baptist, but he was also a Scientologist. My mother was, at the time of my birth, a Catholic, but she was also a Rosicrucian. They made the decision to send me to a Christian Catholic school, and at the time we lived in a small town called Springs. And somewhere along the line, everybody's heard about Springs. So I had a very, shall we say, multifaceted education, as it were, from a spiritual side, growing up. And then at one stage, my mom decided that she was going to follow the charismatic, the Christian charismatic movement. And because my mom was a heavy influence in my life, I also followed in the charismatic sort of influence. Then I enrolled, well, after school, I started studying psychology because I've always had an interest in the human psyche. It's always been, it's a dangerous and fascinating playground. If you are of a light heart, if not, then it's a dangerous, an extremely dangerous battleground. But I digress. So I studied psychology, got my honors degree, but at the end of that, I suddenly needed money. I had to go out and earn a living. Fancy that, because yeah, that's life. And so through over the next 2 or 3 years, through a curious chain of events, which also is still quite fascinating, because I've always maintained that you're in the right place at the right time. But through this curious fascination of events, I ended up working in construction, in contracts management on mega projects that were in the billions of US dollars. And it was one of those instances where the career chose me almost, because I was pretty good at it. In fact, I dare to say that I was really, really good at it. And over a period of 22 years, I lived in 4 countries, 2 hemispheres, several time zones, and I've worked with over 56 nationalities. And I've most of my experience was in the Middle East. So I got to experience Islamic culture firsthand, which only tied back to my early spiritual education, and et cetera, et cetera. In the meantime, of course, while I was at university, and for a few years after that, I studied Kung Fu. So I got a very sort of well-rounded education in Eastern philosophy and Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism. Taoism particularly fascinated me. And in many ways, I think in many ways, I find Taoism to be closer to the truth, as it were, in terms of a spiritual path, because one of the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching is that that which can be named is not the true essence, or something like that. You cannot put a name to the true essence of that which we may call God, or assign a name to. Anyway, so at the end of the pandemic, no, sorry, not at the end of the pandemic, but towards the end of the pandemic. Actually, let me go back a little bit. My mom passed away in 2019. I was in the Middle East. She was in Australia. And my wife and I flew to Australia to attend the funeral, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, what follows after that, as part of the natural grieving process, is a period of reflection, because you're confronted by your own mortality and what on earth are you doing with your life, and what meaning are you finding in what you're doing, and all of these questions, like what legacy are you going to leave, what impact are you actually leaving on the planet or on the people that are around you. And whilst I was pretty effective in maintaining really, really good relationships and long-term friendships, I came to realize that it's not enough. We weren't just born to live and pay bills and die. We're the only species on this planet that have to pay to be here. But I came to this, I want to say, an awakening. I can't say an awakening, because it's just another point on that ever continuing certificate of life. But a number of interesting things happened. When my mom passed away, she wasn't very wealthy, but I inherited from her a sum of around about £6,000. And at the time, I was working from home because of the pandemic. And I was looking around for something to study because I also had quite a bit of free time. After working hours, I had quite a bit of free time because it's amazing. If you don't have to travel to an office, you get an extra hour or two in your day. So I was looking for something to study because I needed something to stimulate my mind. Now, I already had did my first certificate in hypnotherapy in 2006, um, which is another story. But because of the psychology and the hypnotherapy and my ongoing interest in the human psyche, I became very interested in a particular course that was offered by the Marissa Peer Foundation in the United Kingdom. And this was a hypnotherapy called rapid transformational therapy. And what really attracted me to it was the fact that it was rapid and transformational. So if you go to the dentist and you've got a sore tooth, you don't want the dentist to say, that's very interesting. Perhaps you should come back next week so we can discuss this a little further. So when people have mental distress, psychological distress, spiritual distress, emotional distress, they want to come and see somebody who's going to give them some relief now. You don't want them to, you don't want to protract the sessions because that's just milking it. You want to give them some relief. If that helps and there's another thing that they need to work on, then we work on that. And that was what attracted me to RTT, rapid transformational therapy, because you got results and measurable results. And so I thought, wow, I really want to enroll in this course. And as it turns out, the course cost £6,000. So my mother put me through university and my honors degree because my father passed away when I was 15. She paid for my education, did everything that above and beyond what a mother would do. And here I was in 2019 with my mother still paying for my education beyond the grave. And that's kind of a sign, to me at least, that was, oh, well, actually, maybe you should go this direction. Yeah. So I was in Kuwait on a contract, and when the contract came to an end, Evelyn and I returned to South Africa, and that's when I then enrolled in my certificate for life coaching. I had already by that stage done a number of courses on Udemy, as one does, in that direction. But I find that the Udemy courses are a very good sort of base foundation, sort of orientation type thing. I needed something more concrete, something that would give me a certificate. And then I did, so when we came home, I did the life coaching course, NLP, followed by TIR. And I've had an ongoing interest in trauma, in helping people through their trauma, because just the fact that we're South Africans means we're traumatized. It's just
got you.
It's handed down in the blood. It's like, here's your standard issue schooling, here's your standard issue religion, here's your standard issue trauma. It's and yeah, it's been an interesting journey, as I say, ongoing. Did I even answer the question? I was rambling, sorry.
No, you did, and it gives us lots to work with. So I just want to extend love to you, because while I don't have experiential understanding of the loss of parents yet, I have an instinctive understanding of what you expressed there, and it touched me. So that wisdom that came with losing both parents, because you mentioned your mother and you didn't mention your father, but I know that you've lost both parents. What wisdom would you say came from that for you specifically? What opened up for you, Mark?
Off the top of my mind, one of the interesting things that I found in my experience was experience the death of a parent at the age of 15, as opposed to experiencing the death of the parent at the age of 47. There's a significant number of years between those two events, and there's a significant amount of maturity. Not that I claim to be mature at all, because I think still sometimes I'm a 24-year-old living in a 50-year-old body, but which is progress, because it used to be 12 years old. So the when my father died, it was, I don't know, I kind of accepted it. It was kind of, and which is also counterintuitive, because the first lie of life is that we are the center of the universe. And we're not. And normally it's, for most people, when it's only, in my experience at least, most people only start to question the system or the way they've been raised or their environment after a traumatic event, or after, a good number of years. And for me, I can't say that I experienced the event as traumatic. It was almost like, okay, it happened. I'm not saying I wasn't traumatized. I'm pretty sure I was, but I think a young 15-year-old mind is a little bit more, is more resilient in certain ways. Um, where whereas in contrast with my 47-year-old self, there was a lot more not, I won't say resistance to acceptance, but there was certainly a lot more introspection. There was certainly a lot more consideration of this concept called death. And one thing that was also another sort of signpost trigger that happened before my mom's passing was in April of the same year, 2019. My mom died in June. So in April of that year, I lost a good friend who we built a friendship up in the work environment, because we both smoked, and we'd both go to the smoke hut, and we'd have these existential conversations, which are not commonplace for your regular office environment. And this man who was officially of the Hindu faith, he was approaching retirement. He was looking, his name was Prakash. And Prakash was looking forward to his retirement, because at home in India, he had a big study with lots of books. And he loved to read, but his pet hate was having to put the book down in order to go to bed. And so he couldn't do that where he was living at the time, because he had to go to work the next morning. So he was looking forward to going home and sitting with a good whiskey and just reading all of those wonderful, wonderful books till whatever hour of the morning he chose. And then in April of that year, he had a heart attack. And it came home to me that he would never read those books. He would never go to his study, and he would never sit there and read those books and enjoy his whiskey. And life is too short to give up on the things that you really want to do, especially when you find meaning in them. And so when my mom passed, it was much more of an emotional and mental experience than when my father passed, which was perhaps more spiritual and visceral. So in terms of the wisdom, if I reconcile the two experiences, again, there's a sort of roundingness, or a sort of an evening off of my global experience of the death of my parents. And somehow through that interplay, which took a while, obviously, it took a number of years, but through that I came to a deeper understanding, or maybe not an understanding, but a deeper level of peace when it comes to letting go of the people you love. It also, of course, helps because we have an ingrained sense of the natural order of things. So if somebody dies in their towards the end of their life, or in the case of my father, as a result of terminal cancer, it's easier to accept, because we have this ingrained belief in a certain natural order of things, that when people are ill, they die. When people get old, they die. If somebody dies of unnatural causes or too early in life, then it affronts that ingrained belief. So that was cathartic in that perspective, and helped me reconcile the two experiences. But it also wasn't something that I did consciously. I didn't sit down and say, okay, well, let's compare these and put it into column A and column B. It's just a sort of a natural collation of information that happens in your subconscious mind somewhere along the line in this massive, brilliant computer back here.
Thank you, Mark. Do you, in any of your work, do you support people who are facing loss, navigating loss? Is it something that you also offer?
Yes, I do. I do grief coaching as part of the life coaching. And just recently, well, actually towards the end of last year, I put together what's called an end of life coaching package. And it's multifaceted. So with the end of life coaching package, it's basically working one-on-one with the primary caregiver to a person that has been diagnosed with a serious condition or a terminal illness. And I will, or at least my services would be on offer to the person diagnosed as well. But 9 times out of 10, when that person is diagnosed with that serious condition, there's a primary caregiver that emerges. And in South African culture, 9 times out of 10, it's a daughter or a mother or somebody that's female. And the primary caregiver, whether it's male or female, ends up being the one who does all the heavy lifting. This primary caregiver is the one who goes to the pharmacy at 3 a.m. in the morning. The primary caregiver is the one who has to sort of scramble around looking for oxygen machines and replacement tubes. And they're the ones who have to keep their phone on through all hours of the night. They're the ones who are constantly on yellow alert. And there's very little support for them, because typically when a patriarch, matriarch, head of the family, or a main family member is diagnosed, the family goes and they disappear into the woodwork, or they just turn into pontificators or something like that. The family splinters and fractures. And the primary caregiver gets little to no support. To add insult to injury, they're constantly in a state of reaction and overwhelm, because on an almost daily basis, new things are emerging. The condition is worsening, or the person has to go to the ICU, or there's something that has to happen. The primary caregiver's life is turned upside down, in as much as the person diagnosed, as much as their life has been turned upside down. So life will never be the same again. So I developed this workshop to be able to work with primary caregivers, to educate them, to teach them, and give them an idea of what's coming down the line. Because how many times have you flown from point A to point B, or maybe you've traveled internationally and you've gone through sort of different layovers, and at the end of the trip you kind of look back and you said, well, geez, if I'd known that I had to go through 15 metal detectors, maybe I wouldn't have worn a belt. Maybe I would have worn a tracksuit pants. It's always that sort of hindsight is 20/20 kind of thing. And 9 times out of 10, when the person dies, now suddenly everybody wants to know, where's the will? What's the password to their phone? How do we get into their bank accounts? What's the status of their financial portfolio? How many properties do they own? Who's going to manage their online persona? What happens to the online persona? Who deletes dad's porn collection? So all of this comes right at the end. It comes too late. So the end of life coaching package that I developed, and then subsequently developed into a workshop, or rather condensed into a workshop, is designed to educate people about that way ahead of time, so that they can put these measures in place ahead of time, so that when the moment of death comes, then when the moment comes for them to say goodbye to their loved one, they've got all of this stuff in place. They don't have to scramble around for stuff, because right at the end, those moments are precious. You want to hold that person's hand. You want to see them look at you one last time. You want to hear them speak one last time. You want to be there for them. The love connection that you share with your loved one is what matters most. You don't want to have to stress and worry about all of the logistics and the legalities. If you've already put that in place, you have the freedom to hold them in love as they make their final transition.
Yeah.
So So yes, and then of course there's obviously the period of bereavement. So yeah, so that's part and parcel of what I do. What I'm busy with at the moment is then I'm taking the workshop, I've condensed it even further, and I'm going to be putting it onto Udemy to make it more accessible to people.
Excellent, Mark. It's the first time I've heard of anything of this nature, and I can understand why it's so important. So thank you for doing that. I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about, that death and our mortality, the closest experience I recently had with what death looks like was my wife's grandmother, beautiful woman. And something was very, very special about being allowed to be around her in her final moments. In your experience of facing loss, understanding death, from the eyes which I was looking through, there was very clearly something which animated the human body, and then there was something which just wasn't there anymore. And I could see, without even being told, that she had now transitioned, or we could say left the body. What is your understanding of death? I don't factually know what happens afterwards, but through your own experiences, how could you shine some light on what death is, what happens with the body, what was in the body, what leaves the body?
Medically speaking, death is the cessation of all bodily functions, but we all know that. And but it's also not just bodily functions, but also the firing of synapses in the brain. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not a doctor, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, they allow a period of 5 minutes, because the brain can still stay alive for a period of time. Even after the body has died, the brain still lives for a little while. But what is death? That's a very good question. It's the single experience, other than birth, that we're all going to experience. It's waiting for us all, unless we ascend, like Jesus, which is a completely different topic of discussion. But barring ascension and the achievement of spiritual mastery, we're all going to die. The body that we have at the moment is going to weaken, wane, fade, die, and rot. And this representation of who you are, which is part and parcel of the answer, is never going to be here again. It's never going to, maybe in about 1 billion years, there may be somebody who looks kind of like me. Because, I mean, we all have sort of so-called doppelgangers in the world. Interestingly enough, I often get mistaken for being some famous Indian actor, and when I get shown the picture, I can't relate. It's just I know I can't, but apparently they can, and I'm famous somewhere. So fascinating. But I think, in simple terms, which are not really so simple, but obviously you're familiar with the expression that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And that is something that I relate to. This body, to me, is not just a vehicle, but is a vehicle, an interface. It is a user interface, if you want to call it that. Because if we consider that spirit is non-material versus the body, which is corporeal, then there's a certain tenuous, albeit tenuous logic, but there's a certain logic that applies, that the spirit cannot interface with material things unless it's a poltergeist, which is also a different topic of discussion. But so sort of general standard issue spirits need a body through which they are able to interface with this world. And this is the plane of demonstration, this Hertzian level of consciousness, this hard and fast material realm, which we consider to be ruled by Newtonian physics. That is the material world in which the spirit takes a body, and in order to express, in order to play. And I think I had a very interesting regression session with a lady a little while ago. She was exceptionally angry. And when I put her into regression in that space between life space, she had an image of coming to a planet that was beautifully green, and it was sort of a fantasy playground kind of thing. But when she arrived here, she found it only to be a prison. And we joked about it afterwards, because quite clearly what she ended up with was not in the brochure. And I think a lot of us experience that. I think that's a lot of that. I think that forms a lot of our existential angst, because we didn't sign up for this shit. And it's like all of this drama, all of this death, all of this pain, all of this emotional things that are happening, all of these challenges that we have to face. We didn't sign up for half this shit because we didn't know about it, because it wasn't in the brochure. But whether there's a brochure or not, whether there's a whether there's a sort of a waiting station between lives or whatever, we're coming here to do something. And I think if we come here to do something, then it's good that we make that something meaningful. It's good that there's this wonderful movie, I don't know if you've seen it, The Last Samurai, with Tom Cruise and Ken Watanabe. I went to see that movie when I was living in Mhloti a couple of years ago. And I went to the movie theater in Mhlanga. Living in Mhloti, went to go and watch the movie in Mhlanga. And after the movie, it was so profound. It had such a profound impact that I drove home, and then I walked on the beach for 7 kilometers. I was almost back in Mhlanga when I realized that I'd been lost in thought for those 7 kilometers, because the impact of the message of that movie was so profound for me at the time that I just got lost in it. And in that movie, Ken Watanabe's character says to Tom Cruise's character, you can spend your whole life looking for a perfect cherry blossom, and if you find one, your life will not have been wasted. And I kind of feel the same way about us living in this life. If you have changed one life, just one, your life has not been wasted. And how many of us, like you and I, get a chance, a privilege to help change the lives of others? Marissa Peer says that if you've changed one life, you've impacted 6,000, because of the ripple effect that goes through just from that one change. And if you sit down and you think about 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, it's pretty easy to come up with that number of 6,000. So I think death is the end of the physical expression of the body, or the configuration, shall we say, that you have taken up in this particular incarnation. Once you lay this body down, once you leave this body, once the essence of that which you are leaves this body, it goes on to other adventures, wherever they may be. It could be somewhere back in the past. It could be somewhere far in the future. It could be in a parallel universe on another planet. Who knows? And I think that for many people, death is a very, very scary experience, because our brain is designed to, our brain has one job, and that is to keep us alive. So anything that is unfamiliar, anything that represents change, anything that potentially represents an incursion or a threat on our safety and security, the brain says, no, don't go there. So that's why it takes courage to actually change yourself and to move forwards and progress and evolve. And that's why personal transformation is so painful, can be so painful. But it's because of this sort of natural reticence that we have, according to our genetic makeup, that we fear death, because nobody's ever come back and said, hey, guys, look at this, check this. You can go down this corridor, you can go, yeah, go. Nobody's ever come back. It's always somber. It's like, I had this out-of-body experience, this near-death experience, and there was lights and there was spider webs, and then some people say, stay away from the light, stay away from the light, it's a trap, it's a trap. So, but nobody's ever come back with empirical evidence. Nobody's ever come back and said, right, according to this study by Peters and Johnson et al., there are 15 things that you need a passport, by the way. And have you checked your have you checked your spiritual insurance? Because, man, I tell you what, they're going to kick you out at the border. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's ever come back with evidence that supports life after death. So it's a great unknown. And So what it comes down to, I think, is when we approach death, it's a matter of attitude. Because if you have a growth mindset, if you have a sense of excitement about getting into the unknown, then perhaps death is not so scary. Perhaps if we adopt an attitude of excitement of what might lie beyond the veil, perhaps death won't be so scary. We choose to believe that there's a spiritual realm because we feel it in our souls. We choose to believe that there's life after death because we feel it in our souls. We feel it in the very core of our being, in the very core of our essence. We feel it. And I would also, not a quantum physicist or a physicist by any nature, but I'd be inclined to suggest it'd be an awful waste of energy if there wasn't some form of something after this. So we resonate. We believe in that with which we resonate, and that with which wherein we find comfort. And I think that it's far more comforting to find joy in the potential of engaging in a new adventure, or in the potential of taking up another body at some stage, or another expression of physicality, or another interface, or another user interface somewhere else in the unknown galaxy. I think it's far more exciting to think of death in that way. And I think if you've anchored your excitement to death, it has a retrospective impact or influence on your life before that. It's not that we should all be running around saying, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, la, 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 la. No. Be here now. Be here now, joyful. Play now.
I love that you use the word play, because it can be very heavy at times, right? And we can get lost in the non-playful aspect of it all. Just picking up on what you're saying, and some will agree and others certainly won't, and that doesn't actually matter. Between me and you, do you think we come here multiple times?
I do. There's what I find interesting is that there's a growing body of evidence, albeit anecdotal, but there's a growing body of evidence to suggest that reincarnation is a real thing. Now, the jury is out in terms of whether reincarnation is actually genetic memory that's passed down through our DNA across the years and ages or whatever, versus the sort of the hopping spirit kind of thing that takes up a new body every time. But to me, there's more of the anecdotal body of evidence towards that supports reincarnation is, to my mind, supports a probability. Now, I must effect the distinction between possibility and probability. Anything is possible. Not everything is probable, because it is entirely possible that you will win the lotto, but it is not probable if you haven't bought a ticket. So when you look at a body of evidence, albeit anecdotal, versus the absence of a body of evidence for one life kind of theory, then I'd be inclined to go with the anecdotal body of evidence, because that, to me, speaks more to probabilities. And having done past life regressions with different people, and having had past life regression experience myself, yes, I do believe we come here more than once. And the one of my outstanding questions is, your personality is a product of consciousness acting upon the brain. So your personality in the next life will not be the same. Your consciousness will be, but your personality will not be. And that's interesting, because I often wonder what elements of consciousness come through in the personality that remain constant across all those lines. So when I was apparently a an astronomer. I was in one of my previous lives. I was an astronomer in somewhere in Europe. As far as I can peg it, it was somewhere in France, in Paris, in fact. And I actually went and Googled the observatory. And what I found on Google was consistent with my past life regression. So when I was astronomer Henri de was I as jovial and energetic as I am today? Did I think the deep thoughts that I think today? Did I one thing that did strike me was that this astronomer was a very introspective person, and I'm very introspective in this life. So perhaps that's an element of consciousness that comes through, expressed in the personality, because through the action of consciousness on the brain, we're able to introspect. And when we introspect on our wisdom, then it becomes something we own as part of our conscious makeup. Or so, yeah, that's just as an aside, that's just one of those unanswered questions that I'd love the answer to sometime.
Likewise. So when we talk about past lives and past life regression, for somebody who's hearing this for the first time, I also have not done any hypnotherapy or past life regression, but it certainly sparks deep interest. What is hypnotherapy, and specifically, what is past life regression?
Hypnotherapy, a lot of people have got a bit of an odd perception of what hypnotherapy is, because mainly that's because of the popularity of hypnotist acts and the media. Well, let's not even go into MK Ultra stuff. But what hypnotherapy is essentially, if you've ever driven from point A to point B, and you've arrived at point B, but can't quite remember how you got to point B, you've been in what's called an alpha state. So our brains have got 4 levels of brainwave. You've got beta, which is where we are now in this conversational environment. Our brain waves are where it's alive, things are happening, and we're discussing things. Our executive functions are online. Just below that, that's that sort of twilight state, just before we fall asleep or just as you're waking up. That's the alpha state, where the brainwaves are much more relaxed. Deeper than that, you get theta, which is best way of describing it is a deep level of alpha. It's sort of where you have REM sleep. It's the dreaming state. And below that is delta, which is your deep sleep. It's where you don't remember anything, you don't move any, that sort of thing. So during hypnotherapy, I guide my client into an alpha state. Because in the alpha state, your executive judgy function goes offline, or it gets turned down or muted or something. So it kind of gets put to the one side. And in that alpha state, when your executive judgy mind is attenuated, then we have more ready access to your subconscious mind. And the subconscious is just an here's an example. All right. So while we're sitting here talking right now, conscious mind, beta brainwave functions, our conscious mind is processing between 2,000 and 4,000 bits of information per second. It's pretty phenomenal, right?
Absolutely.
But when you consider that in contrast to the subconscious mind, the subconscious mind is processing anything between 2 and 4 billion pieces of information per second. So the image that I often have is of this little ant riding this big elephant. And 95 to 99% of our behavior is governed by our subconscious. So here we are, this little ant thinking, oh, geez, this is a wonderful day. I'm in control of this elephant. And then the elephant turns this way, and then the ant will say, well, yes, but I always wanted to go that way. Anyway, we think we're in control, but we're not. We're the product of our subconscious programming, our experiences, the things we've learned. And a wonderful study conducted by Schwartz et al. Or something like that. They did horrible experiments on monkeys. But to our benefit, what came out of these studies was that split seconds, just a split second before you reach for a glass of water, split second before you reach for anything, split second before you move anywhere, there's a wave of electricity that passes through the motor cortex. And then the action is carried out. So most of our actions are instinctive. Most of our actions are governed. I mean, look at me with my hands and everything. I'm not thinking about waving them around. Well, I am now that I'm thinking about it. But generally speaking, when you gesticulate in conversation, you don't think about it. It just happens. And so they were investigating the concept of free will. But what they found was because of this wave of electricity that passes across the brain, it takes an act of conscious will not to carry out that instinctive reaction. So if you consider conflict situations where, let's say, a couple and they're having a heated argument, they're going at each other, they're biting each other the whole damn time. They're not thinking about what they're saying. They're going to regret it tomorrow, but they're just firing missiles at each other. That's instinctive. That's maybe their trauma brain that's talking, but they're firing these things at each other instinctively. They're allowing their used with permission animal nature to govern what should be an adult conversation. So the concept of free will is not so much free will, it's actually free won't, because it takes a conscious act not to react instinctively. And so when you get that into that alpha state, when I put somebody into that alpha state, we can now allow the subconscious mind to talk to us. But it's not going to come up with a detailed lecture. The subconscious mind talks to us in pictures and emotions. So we'll go and we'll do in a way, you could think of it as a guided meditation, and I'm the facilitator because I take you through a very set process with very different steps. I mean, very, very clearly defined steps. And you go on a journey that allows your subconscious mind to give you insight, to give you the root cause of your depression, to give you the root cause of your anger, to give you the root cause of a classic case study is one lady went to a hypnotherapist because she wanted to lose weight. Turns out this young lady was abused as a child, and she formed a belief about herself that only when she's big can she protect herself. But at that young age, big meant big. So she ended up being overweight. She ended up being obese because of that belief. When she got an understanding and an insight of that belief, that false belief about herself, everything changed. She lost weight. She achieved her weight goals. And weight gain is not just malnutrition. It's not just poor eating. It's not just multiple trips to McDonald's. You got to look at why. Why are you going to McDonald's so many times? Why? What's prompting you? What need is it fulfilling that you are not aware of? What belief is it validating? What false belief did you form about yourself in your childhood that your current behavior is validating or protecting you against? And that's why I say it's fascinating, because very often a person will come in with something that they want to work, which is called X, but the solution actually lies in Y. And during hypnotherapy, through this guided process, you get to an understanding of that root cause. You get to the root cause, then you pluck it out like a dentist would pluck out a sore tooth. And now you've got to put in a prosthetic. But a prosthetic, when it comes to a new belief, is not something, tangible. You've got to actually implant a new belief, and then you've got to reinforce that belief. For many people, the insight alone is sufficient for them to resolve the issues that they're busy with. With other people, it may take longer because that particular false belief is web tied into other things that are also holding them back. So every case is different. Now, when it comes to past life regression, it's very much the same process that I follow, except instead of going to events or memories or scenes in this life, I use a um, sort of a like a I change the process a little bit because the guided meditation takes them to a different place. And then what's fascinating is that they end up either in a space between lives or somewhere in a past life. It's such a fascinating regression. A few years ago, a lady came to see me because she'd fallen. Now she's this is now 2006 or 7. She a very well educated white lady, um, and she was in a sort of high powered financial position, and she'd fallen in love with an Indian man in her office. And because of the cultural differences, as a couple they were receiving quite a bit of flack about it, but that didn't bother her. She wanted to know why she has this electric connection with this man that she hardly knows from a bar of soap. Now she's the only person that has come to see me who's used the word crepuscular in its correct term, in its correct context. Now, crepuscular, you know that sort of when the sun goes down and it's that purple orangey light?
Yes.
That's crepuscular. And so she came to see me at around about that time of the evening, and she remarked, and her remark was on the sunset, and she used the word crepuscular. I'm a writer, so thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known what that word meant.
You
But
taught me something. First time I've heard that.
yeah, right. So so clearly she's an educated woman. Clearly, she's very intelligent, etc., etc. Put her into hypnosis, go into past life regression. And one of the things that I tell my clients when we're doing a past life regression is that they must always talk to me in English, because I don't want to take them back into a past life where they can only speak French, because I can't speak French. So I told her we will speak English. So we go back into this past life. Now, here's this educated woman with a very strong, confident presence in her voice, but her voice changes. Her voice becomes that of a little girl. Her vocabulary becomes that of maybe a 12-year-old. And she relates a story. She tells a story about how her brother, she lives in what sounded like could be a compound, where other families were. It had walls around it. And her brother has just returned from somewhere, and she, being a woman, was not allowed to leave the compound, but he, being a man, he had free reign, free travel. And but now he's returned to tell her the story about a strange creature that breathes steam and runs on metal tracks. So from this regression, what we could figure out is that she was probably somewhere in the middle to far east at the time when steam engines were or railways were being constructed in that part of the world. And she had such a close relationship with her brother that it was sufficient evidence for her to deduce that her brother in that previous life was the man with whom she was in love in this life. Absolutely fascinating.
Incredible.
Whether it's true or not, because obviously past life regressions are very difficult to verify. There's always too much, there's a lot of guesswork involved, I suppose, if you want to put it that way. But whether it's true or not, what's most important is that she found meaning in it. And so whether it's a current life, past experience regression, going back and looking at formative experiences, or whether you go back and you look at past life regressions and possible past lives, it's more about the meaning of the content that emerges from the session than the actual veracity of the content itself. Because I think as part of in our work as transformational coaches, as life coaches, and people who are passionate and enthusiastic about personal evolution, part and parcel of our job is to help people find meaning, isn't it? So by helping somebody find meaning, that is when you can see that dawn of realization, an aha moment, that sort of, oh wow, when you, and it's, if you experience it viscerally with them, you know, that is so rewarding, because you know you've made a difference. You haven't found just one cherry blossom, you found
I'm with you.
another cherry
I'm
blossom.
feeling what you're saying, and it's so accurate. I love that you said she found meaning, and that's actually what matters, right? That's what it's about, and then how that translates into how we choose to live our lives. Mark, one of your favorite quotes: "How can you have time if you don't take time?"
Yes,
Tell us
the
more about that
Merovingian,
one.
the Merovingian from the Matrix. Oh, uh, that that the first Matrix movie I watched, probably late 1999. It was the biggest mind of the of the year, and I think for many people, the Matrix was also, you know, from a philosophical and spiritual perspective, the Matrix was a real kick in the head. But then, of course, they made the next two, and I can't remember if it's in the second or the third one where you meet the Merovingian, um, played by that wonderful actor Eve something or other. I forget what his name was. But there's a moment where Trinity, they're going to rescue Neo, I think it was, and they go to the Merovingian to do something, to plead for him or something like that. And the Merovingian, arrogant as he is, he makes this sort of, embarks on this little monologue, and then at one stage he says, "Ah, yes, but how can you have time if you don't take time?" And that struck me, because every, in essence, if you don't plan your day will plan you. If you don't seize your day will seize you. If you don't give direction to your life will direct you. It becomes the tail wagging the dog. So I find I find it annoying when people say, "Oh, I'm too busy." No, it's not a matter of being too busy. It's a matter of priorities. Was it important to you or wasn't it important to you? Yes, it was important. Okay, but what was more important? So what happens is when you have priorities in your life, in your day-to-day activities, you take time to do it. Because in the act of taking time, you're making time.
That's so
You're
good.
saying, you're saying this hour of my day is dedicated to, like today, to our chat today.
We've taken this time.
We've taken time
Mm,
to chat. So it's, you can't have time unless you
mm,
take time. So if one of your objectives or dreams or something, I've recently rekindled my love of hiking. Um, but I don't like going for a hike on the weekend because there's just too many people and it just becomes a jostle. So I take the time during the week to set time aside to do that activity, and then I block that out in my calendar. I've taken time from the future and dedicated it so that in the moment I have the time.
mm. Thank you, Mark. You're a man who is driven by living an authentic life and adding on to that, helping others to do the same. So I thought we could have a moment of that. What scares you? What scares Mark from where he currently finds himself in his life? Is there anything?
Um, Despite my spiritual perspectives, one of the things, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is trust God or
Mm,
trust the universe. Throughout my life, there have been signs, you know, there's been meaningful coincidences, synchronicities, synergies, like the story I told you about my mom and how she paid for my education after the
yes.
grave, the meaning that I found in Prakash's death, retrospectively looking back on how my parents' diversity of spiritual education had its meaning in my life going forwards, and all of the things that I've experienced since. I've always, if I look back at my life, I've always been at the right place at the right time. I've always been divinely protected somehow. Um, I've always been the guy that drives over the bridge like 10 minutes before it collapses. It's somehow there's always been this divine protection around me, this divine abundance around me. Starting my own business, coming back, stepping out of the world of construction to start my own business, scared the bejesus out of me. And because at the end of the day, you've got to put food on the table. At the end of the day, you want to live. You want to live. You don't want to exist. You need money in order to have the freedom, in order to express your creativity, in order to help people. If you are financially abundant, it is easier to help people from that position of strength. And when in those months where I don't meet my success metrics, I get shit scared, because I think, to me, one of my core beliefs is that money equals freedom. So one of my highest values is liberty. Personal liberties is huge for me, and money equates to that. Having money equates to having the freedom to do what I want to do, to be able to freely express myself and to help other people. And when I don't make those success matrix, it affects not just my poverty mindset, or not mindset, but my fear of poverty. It triggers that big time. But then, of course, it triggers into it ties into the fear of the loss of liberty, the fear of the loss of freedom, the fear of having to go back into the workplace and live somebody else's life, or live their dream instead of my dream. And I understand that there's a time and place, and the universe has its has its reasons, although it also has a sense of humor. But sometimes it's difficult to relate to that sense of humor. Sometimes I don't understand what the universe is saying, which says, be patient, I've got this. Yes, but give me a timetable, give me a schedule. Let me see. I like the security. I don't like the insecurity. Give me, just, why aren't you listening to me?
Like, no, you're not listening to me.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, and then, in my calmer, more sane moments, I sit back and I look and I laugh at myself, because I've got 50 years of evidence that the universe has looked after me. What the fuck is my problem now?
Yeah.
Sorry for the rack band French. But anyway, yeah, I think you get it. My biggest fear is a lack of prosperity.
I appreciate your honesty and your openness, because I think it's very familiar among society what you're speaking towards, and you're touching it on me as well. So it's amazing how these things come up. Mark, how can people get hold of you? There's so much we've touched on, and there's a whole lot more which I know that people can actually access through you and your wisdom. How can they get in touch? Where are you? What do they need to do to contact you?
Well, my WhatsApp number is 071-864-0071. My website is mdtransformations.coza. And yeah, those are, my email address is mark@mdtransformations.coza.
I just want to thank you for the work you're doing, for the wisdom you're sharing, and most importantly, that you're doing with so much meaning. I think that really is the catalyst for everything. So thank you, Mark. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for allowing us to connect. And I have no doubt we're probably going to do this again and go down all different sorts of rabbit holes.
I look forward to it. Ryan, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to be here with you today. And thank you for the opportunity to meet you face to face. And I look forward to the day when we can actually meet in person.
Likewise, Mark. Thank you so much.
All right, my friend. Have a wonderful day and a great weekend.
You too. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.